Hello, welcome to Jewish Museum Milwaukee's Museum Moments. Today, we are exploring anti-Semitism in Milwaukee. This is part of our exploration broadly this week on anti-Semitism. And tonight, we will be doing a program with a number of groups, the Holocaust Museum in LA, the National Museum of Jewish American History, the JCRC, about some current litigation that is going on against people who were involved in the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. And one of the things that I think we're all somewhat concerned with or aware of is that there have been increased incidents of anti-Semitism. And all of this goes through a process in terms of understanding anti-Semitism in both Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, and in the United States through a kind of national process. And so today I have the fabulous director of the Jewish Community Relations Council here with me to share that process and why this is important and why this is something we should be talking about. So, Jenny, welcome to Museum Moments.
Thanks, Ellie. Thanks so much for having me and being part of this important discussion. And of course, so looking forward to the panel discussion tonight as well at 7 p.m.
Thanks for the date time piece. Let's talk about this audit because it's complicated. It's big. How long has this been going on? When did the community start trying to have some sort of sense of what anti-Semitism looked like?
Yeah, so the Jewish Community Relations Council has been in Milwaukee since 1938, and a core part of our work has always been around fighting anti-Semitism. To my knowledge, in the late 90s is about when we started really tracking those trends. And in its current form, like we have it today, started in 2011, where we really put out a full comprehensive annual report of the incidents that happened throughout the year. We categorize them so we can track what types of incidents are happening, and then we report out on them, not only to show those trend lines and show where there's growth or where there's change or where there's diminished amounts of anti-Semitism, but then also to educate the community, the broader Milwaukee and Wisconsin community. And I should mention too, when I say taken incidents, I mean for the entire state of Wisconsin. So we're not just bound to Milwaukee or southeastern Wisconsin area. We really take an incident throughout the entire state.
And can you go through what that process is like, from here's an incident that happens in Eau Claire to kind of the statement and report that's released annually? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the incident comes to us in many different forms. It could be we hear about it on the news. That happens sometimes, and we'll reach out to the survivors or the victims involved. And then we go from there in writing up a report, or someone will reach out to us if something happened to them or someone close to them, and we will write up a report as well. We always keep information anonymous. It's just the staff that interact directly with the individuals reporting that we know their information. And then in December and February, we go through a voting process within our anti-Semitism task force and our community council and board to look over those incidents and determine if they are in fact anti-Semitic, if there was an intent to be anti-Semitic, or if they were perceived as such. And we do not publish those incidents as a whole. We publish them in their categories and the total number of incidents that happened throughout that year. And again, I can go through those categories we have. But
yeah, what are those categories that, I think when you hear categories of anti-Semitism, you're like, how could there be, anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism. How can there be more?
Yeah, exactly. So the big ones are expression. So is this a verbal comment? Is it a direct letter to someone? Vandalism, doesn't mean enough explanation there. Harassment, threats, or assaults are also its own category. Discrimination, so employment, education, housing, those types, and hate group activity. So those are kind of the big four that we can categorize into and then report out and track our trends throughout the year.
So because I think one of the things that when you're like, well, you hear about this, you have the report, what is the difference between something that is anti-Semitism and something that's not? How do you feel like those decisions come to bear in that moment?
Yeah, it's like most forms of hate. When you see it, you know it. And the amazing thing is that we have this really robust process. And when I say voting on them, I mean it's really a more of a deliberative process instead of just an up-down vote. We have amongst our anti-Semitism task force, our community council, and our board really long conversations about what was the intent behind this, how was it perceived, and then deciding from there if it is an incident. And very often there's an easy gut check on these things, right? You just kind of know, obviously a swastika is always per se anti-Semitic, but very often language is also pretty clear cut on what the intent is behind it.
So in the past several years, as the council has been gathering this information, or even since 2011, what are the trends that have emerged in this time?
Yeah, well, the main one is that anti-Semitism is on the rise and in a really significant form since 2012. So
do you want me to show the slide?
I'm going to hold off on showing it right away, but I'm referencing it just so I have the numbers in front of me. But we had just about 11 or so incidents that we recorded in 2012, and really keeping to the same intake of incidents. We don't go out in the community and ask people to always give us incidents, right? We're not changing our methodology per se, but now as of 2019, we had 72 incidents.
Oh, wow.
And some might say, that's a really big jump. How is that possible? This really tracks with the ADL as well and what they've been seeing nationally, as well as in the Midwest. So the ADL put out their report in 2019, and they've been calibrating incidents, I want to say since 73 or 78. And this was the highest year on record for them as well. So there's just been a really steep increase that we've seen in this time period.
In thinking, is there one particular area in which the increase is most noticeable, or is it kind of across all of those different categories?
I would say it's up in all of them. The one place that it might be down slightly is discrimination. But the real rise we're seeing is hate group activity. Between 2018 and 2019, I believe it was a 900% increase that we saw, which was really stark. Yeah, in Wisconsin. That exact figure isn't exactly what tracks with the ADL, but they've also seen a stark jump, or they've also seen a big jump, especially in the Midwest, is a jump in K-12 incidents. So a lot of verbal incidents happening in schools, and we've tracked that as well, especially in middle schools. So that's where, unfortunately, a lot of the jump is happening.
So that's really where this idea of education and talking about things and exploring what it means to be Jewish and who are Jewish people becomes really important. Are most of those incidents directed towards Jewish individuals, or kind of broad, something that's just said broadly in a school setting?
I know there were probably several incidents last year that we had, and I can't in my mind figure out, I don't remember which were just verbally to a classroom, response to a teacher's comments, or directed to a student. But I would say that there's not one or the other. They definitely happen in both forms. It's something that can be directed to a student or said broadly in a class. And really what's most important when teachers or staff in a school or even peers of students hear a comment like this, instead of just kind of being shameful and saying, oh, I didn't really want to hear that, that wasn't a thing, calling it out is really important, and making sure that the student who is Jewish or is Jewish and that comment is being directed towards is not the only one that has to stand up for themselves. So we really encourage that through our work through Hours Against Hate. And I know HERC does a lot of that work as well that they do.
Yeah, no, I think that idea of allyship across, any sort of racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism is so important, and such an important message for this particular moment. In thinking about like the anti-Semitism audit, what are the kinds of takeaways that you see? Because I think one of the things that can happen when we start talking about anti-Semitism is this feeling of depression and how can we possibly overcome this? It's still here. It's been this many years since the Holocaust, and we still are in, now there's even more incidents than there were 8 years ago. All of those pieces. What are your takeaways from a kind of proactive stance here?
I think the first is call it out and call it in when you see it. I mean, that goes for all forms of hate, but as a Jewish person, that's the first piece of it. And also to not be, unhopeful. I mean, anti-Semitism has been around for as long as Jews have been around. So it's not a new form of hate. And we just have to keep being our truest selves and not hiding away who we are. And that's extremely important to keep moving forward and educating and not being ashamed to say, look, the anti-Semitism is up. Maybe this is something we don't want to talk about, but it's actually quite important that we do, and we call it out whenever we see it. My grandma, she's 97 years old, and she likes to remind me a lot nowadays that the pendulum always swings, right? You know, I can tell you we're up very high percents. You know, we're up to 72 incidents last year, and we're probably on track to match or surpass that this year. But you gotta just keep, you know, pushing and fighting against the hateful rhetoric that people have, because it'll swing back. It always does.
So, Jenny, as we're kind of wrapping up, is there anything else that you would want to share about JCRC and your work and this work, or any of the broad community partnerships that JCRC is pursuing?
You know, when we talk about being a little despondent during this time and being really difficult knowing how much hate there is, I would say work in coalitions always. It's extremely, extremely important to work closest with coalition partners, because hate is across the board. The racist is probably also an anti-Semite, is also a xenophobe. So working with all of our partners across the community in Milwaukee to make sure we can fight hate as one unified front is how we can diminish it altogether. So I'm really looking forward, like I said, to the discussion tonight. I think it's really important that we shine light on Charlottesville, coming up over 3 years ago now. And so I'm just really thankful for the Jewish Museum in Milwaukee for, oh, there goes the light, for hosting that. And I'm really looking forward to that discussion later on.
We're literally turning the light on anti-Semitism right now. This is the moment that we're having. Well, thank you, Jenny. Thank you, JCRC, for all of the work that you guys do. And we hope that some of you will join us tonight. You can go to jewishmuseummilwaukee.org for more information about our discussion tonight with Integrity First for America. I also want to thank our generous sponsor, Robin Cohen, for supporting these museum moments. If while you're at jewishmuseummilwaukee.org's website, you want to make a donation, we wouldn't object to that either. Next week, we'll be exploring death and burial. So, you know, it's a real happy week here in Jewish Museum Milwaukee. Thanks so much and have a great day.